So in part one of the series, what we spoke about was kind of what got me to the point where I was starting to build something online. Now, what I want to hit on here is telling a few more stories, but basically all around this theme. Those three decisions that are by far the three most important decisions that everybody makes over the course of their life. And here they are in order. The first one is who to marry. The second one is where you live. And the third one is what do you do for work? So, most important decisions you're ever going to make in order. Who you marry, where you live, what you do for work. Those are also three decisions that a lot of people make, not necessarily who to marry now, but the remaining two, a lot of people make very, very young and without a lot of experience that would allow them to make that decision well. And I want to talk to you about the discovery process that I kind of went through, largely without knowing it, to be honest. A lot of this was luck, not skill. Looking back, it worked out well because I was able to get a lot of experience. But what I want to talk to you about is the discovery process of how I kind of went about making those decisions. And we ended the last episode, I think, Amber, by me talking about how I screwed it up with Allison. And I said that I
I have
would,
been waiting for this story.
yeah, I mean, okay. So we ended the last episode where I had been dating Allison for a little bit of time, and she was finishing medical school. So she's a naturopathic doctor. So she was finishing medical school, and I was starting this like internet thing, right? We met when we were personal trainers. And I remember exactly where we were. We were lying in bed. She was at my place, and I was talking to her about this book that I wanted to write. And I never wrote this book. I never will write this book, so somebody else take it. But I was like, it would be really interesting to do this thing where you go around the world and in different countries you meet people and you interview them and you train with them and you learn about how they look at fitness in their part of the world. And you write this basically this whole book of like fitness around the world and you look for common themes and stuff like that. So I was telling her about this idea, right? She's like, oh, well, I wouldn't be able to come with you though. I was like, no. She's like, oh, well, when are you going to start? I was like, oh, pretty soon. She goes, so I guess this is it for us? And that was it. And so she left. Um, so that's where I screwed it up. And so she left, and I actually left for Hawaii about a week later. And I don't remember whether I was going to start this book in Hawaii or whether I just like wanted to live in Hawaii for a couple months. But I mean, I literally booked a flight to Hawaii and just like left 3 days later, and left everything that I had and threw on my backpack. And at that point, I was doing a whole bunch of things that I wasn't quite happy with myself for. Like in the fitness industry, not so much anymore. I mean, still to some extent, but if you've got like a decent knowledge of online marketing, there's a lot of things that you can do in the fitness industry to make money. And so at that point, I had started this website. I think it was called fitnessebookreviews.com, I think is what it was. And all that I was doing was I was getting affiliate commissions for reviewing ebooks and like sending people to buy that ebook via my affiliate link. And the reason that this worked is because I had the PTDC, which had a high domain rank, so I had a high page authority, so a high search engine ranking. And a lot of people were reviewing these ebooks. I mean, I say reviewing, like basically like saying, go buy this ebook because they're going to pay us like 50 or $100 if you buy it with our link. But I was able to outrank all of these reviews because all I needed to do was send a link from the PTDC to this review. And the PTDC's page authority basically fed this review. So I started doing that, and I would spin up a new website every day, every 2 days. That would be like a review for these things, and I'd rank that new website, and it would sit out in the world, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm just going to do this for like the rest of my life. I was like, but wait a minute. After I did 3 or 4 of them, I was like, wait a minute, man. I don't like myself right now. Like maybe making money doing whatever you can do to make money isn't all that there is. Because a lot of these things, I mean, they weren't bad, but they were like, hey, how to get abs? Hey, how to get shredded? Hey, here's this diet. And I just didn't quite like that about myself. So I was living in Oahu. I was by myself, literally by myself. I've told a little bit of this story before on this podcast, but I was living in a town called Laie, which is on the north shore of Oahu. And it's a Mormon town. It's got one of the biggest Mormon temples. It's got a Brigham Young campus. I was by myself. I mean, there might have been 4 or 5 days where I didn't speak to another human being. It was that isolated, which sounds exotic, but like, you try it. It's pretty, it's difficult, and I was very lonely. I missed Allison a lot. And it was one of those things where I didn't quite understand why I missed her so much. And I talked to her now, and she's like, yeah, I really missed you too. And I didn't get it. We'd only been together for like 8 months when we split up. So she's like, yeah, I didn't quite get it. Like, why did I care so much that you were gone? But I spent 3 months on Laie by myself. And I shut down fitness ebook reviews, and I shut down a bunch of the other stuff that I was doing. This is when I also started training with Dan Trink, and I put out the first internet product and stuff with him. And then once I was done shutting everything down, I decided to leave that part of my life behind, physically and metaphorically. And I picked up and I rented a room in Maui, so on another island in Hawaii. And I literally off of Craigslist found a room to rent and just took a flight to Maui, threw my backpack on my shoulder and went to Maui. And I started building everything back up in Maui. And this is when I was writing Vironomics, the book. This is when I did a lot of the writing for that book. And I was starting to work on things that felt right. I was starting to explore a lot more research. I was starting to do things because they energized me, not because they would make a lot of money. And it felt really, really good. And then a couple of weeks before I was due to come home, I was in Maui for about 3 months. So I guess it would have been about 2 months in, I get a message from Allison. And it was a Facebook message. And she used, I think it was an Anchorman line. She used a Ron Burgundy line. It was the first time that we had spoken in 5 months. Like nothing, right? Found out later she had dated somebody else during that time. I didn't. I hadn't been on a single date in that time. But she said, I'm going to throw something at you. If you don't like it, you can throw it right back.
Great line from the movie, by the way.
Great line. First thing, I should find this message from her. It'd be way back in her Facebook chat history, but I should find it. But it was the first thing that she had said to me in 5 months. And anyway, she went on to say she was dating somebody, they split up, she's finished school, she's going to be studying for her boards pretty soon, but she basically just wants to have fun and wants to take a trip. So can she come visit? No strings attached, just come for a week, she'll fly and we'll explore Maui together. So I was like, hell yes, booty call, amazing. This is going to be great. Secretly, though, of course, I just missed her like crazy. And so I was really happy that she came. So she came and we had the most phenomenal week with one another. It was I rented a car, we drove all across Maui, the road to Hana, purely unencumbered. But I remember we had a very open conversation because at that point we were we're just going to be really good friends. I don't, we didn't think that there was anything there. And we were driving the road to Hana, which if you've ever done it in Maui, it's on the north shore of Maui. It's one of the most beautiful scenic roads to drive in the world. It really is spectacular. And we spoke very openly about what we were looking for in somebody else. She was just about to write her board exams for medical school. She wasn't going to do whatever I was doing. And what I said to her is, I don't know what this journey is that I'm on, but it seems to me like I kind of need to be with one of two people. They either need to be a cheerleader and somebody who's really going to support me in what I'm doing, or they need to be somebody who wants to take over the world with me. I kind of don't think I'm going to be able to be with anybody in the middle. Regular professional jobs are in the middle. Somebody who's a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, whatever, who works regular hours and has their weeks off for work or whatever it is. It just didn't seem like that was going to work. And so she went back home, and I went back home about 2 weeks, 3 weeks later. And she started like studying at my place that summer because she was studying for her board exams. And like she's bringing all of her bags over, and then one day there's like a toothbrush in the bathroom, and then it just like slowly worked its way in. And but still, we were friends. I mean, we were having fun, but we were friends. And then she passed her board exams, and she was going to go on her one big trip before she became a doctor and started her life. So there was a goodbye party for her, and I was at the goodbye party, like saying goodbye to her. And then she left for Thailand the next day, and I was at home. And my mom gave me the best advice that anybody has ever given me. She told me about this story where my dad went to Europe with his best friend, Michael Pascoe. And my mom got on a flight and went to Europe. And that's one of the reasons why they're married. And she looked at me and she said, if you want to be with her, you better get your ass on a plane. And I booked a flight that day, and I was in Thailand 2 days later. And we've been together ever since. But I think that that time apart was really, really valuable for us in really figuring out what we meant to one another, and also having very open conversations about, like, what are you looking for? Do we have different aspirations in life? And that's not to say that it can't change, but if you have one person who's like, call it an entrepreneur and wants to take over the world and wants to travel and doing all these things, it's going to be very hard for them to live a life with somebody who's like, call it an accountant. Nothing against those two things, but I think it's very important when you are, like I said, the most important decision you can make in your life is who to marry. And part of that conversation is, we're going to do life together. How do you want to do life? Who to marry also goes with business partnerships. I just made a big investment into another business. And part of the conversation we had was not just around money. It was like, what are your aspirations for this business? What do you want to do? Do you want to build this thing to sell in 3 years? Do you want to build this thing to run? I think Jason and I have a lot of conversations about that with the mentorship. Amber, the person who is doing some test projects right now to take over running Quick Coach, like we've had conversations like that. Like, let's make sure that we are on the same page with where we want this to ultimately go. If we're going to get married, it's very important to have those conversations. And then you get into, like, where do you live? A lot of people live in a town that they grew up in, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And if you end up back there, I think it's good. But I also think that a lot of people would benefit living in a lot of different living situations over the course of their life to figure out what they like and what they don't like. Because a lot of things that we fetishize about, we realize when we live there that it doesn't actually make us happy. Try living in a big house in the middle of the country or the top of a hill in isolation with a beautiful sunset view. I say it right now and you could picture yourself there and it sounds incredible. But I'm also telling you that, like, my guess is that if you were there within a week or two, you'd want to get the heck out. Those places are great places to vacation and take some time away. But the day in and day out, you stop appreciating the actual beauty of the thing. Because we get on this, what's called hedonic treadmills, which means that we stop appreciating something once we have it very, very quickly. So we stop appreciating something after a week or two of having that thing. So even the most beautiful sunset view, the best car in the world, whatever it is, for the most part, after a week or two of owning that thing or of having that thing or seeing that thing, you actually stop appreciating it. Now, the really cool thing about the hedonic treadmill is that if you let it go and then come back, you actually gain another week or two of enjoying that thing. So, the most beautiful view in the world, you stop appreciating after you see it for a week straight. But then if you leave and come back to it, you'll start appreciating it again. And so that was the beginning of our journey with Allison, where we just lived in a lot of different places over a lot of years. That winter in Thailand, so we were in Thailand for most of it on an island called Koh Phangan, but we also spent about a month in Vietnam. We spent a couple weeks in Cambodia as well. And we lived in like fancy hotels, we lived in huts on the beach. But where we lived for a lot of the time in Thailand, for about 2 months, was a cave, a literal cave. And in Thailand, on Koh Phangan specifically, if anybody's been there, there are these famous parties that are called the full moon parties in an area called, um, oh God, Haduan, I think it's called. Haduan, yeah. And so just to give you an idea, like the New Year's full moon party that we had was 30,000 people on the beach. Nuts. Crazy. Super fun if you get the chance to do it. But in and around the cove from Haduan, I don't think that that's the right name. Anyway, the southern part of Koh Phangan, it was a long time ago. There's a cove that you can only access by boat called Had Yuan. And on Had Yuan, there's a place called the Sanctuary. The Sanctuary is like a healing thing. And it was the funniest place ever to live because everybody there were like crazy spiritual people. Like, I think I've told you guys there was a dude who like embodied animals and he would drink his own piss and like jump around like a frog. Um, there were people who, all types of spiritual healers and stuff like that. But then these people would do like coffee enemas and like the healthiest thing all day, every day. And then they would be up till 10 in the morning doing MDMA like at dance parties. So it was kind of weird that like they consider themselves spiritual and healthy and then they would basically like kill themselves with drugs. Anyway, I didn't do any of that. But we lived there for about 2 months and Allison was the healer at the sanctuary. She was like the medical person at the sanctuary. And we lived in this cave. It was like $4 a night. It's like, and it had a single old gym mat. Remember those like crappy like plastic gym mats? So it had a single old gym mat that we slept on. The shower, there were like frogs like in the shower. Bats would fly in at night. We had, of course, a huge mosquito net, but it was blazing hot in that thing. We would just be like sweating on this gym mat. Cats would run in. I got bitten by a centipede at night, which for anybody who doesn't know, like a centipede can send you to the hospital. Like the bites are pretty nasty. Like in the middle of the night, like I was sleeping. We both caught a fungus on that gym mat that took us about a year and a half to eliminate from our bodies. That was where we fell in love. It was, you can't,
I'm
I don't know
sorry.
I don't know what it was about that experience.
Oh, oh my God. You just read the worst Hallmark card of all time. Blank, blank, blank. And that's where we fell in love. Happy
And that's
anniversary,
where
baby.
we fell in love. But it really was.
Oh, man.
We were we were so far in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by this beauty, loving each other deeply, like super uncomfortable and yet so happy and blissful. And meanwhile, I'm running this internet business. Okay? The internet, when it worked, could barely load a web page, let alone upload video and audio to the net, to the World Wide Web. So I could see the trends that were coming. This was 2013. So this was the winter of 2013, 2014. So I could see the trends that were coming. I could see that video was coming up. I could see that podcasts were coming up. But here I was on this cave in the middle of nowhere with internet that could barely load a web page. And that's when I decided that I'm okay with not optimizing the business. I'm going to build my platform based off of writing because it takes less bandwidth so that we get to do things like live on a cave on an island in Thailand. And so if you wonder why the core of my business is writing and has always been, yes, now I enjoy writing, but that decision was actually predicated on freedom to move around the world because of that experience in Thailand. In the years that followed, we lived, God, we lived almost everywhere around the world. I mean, we lived in Costa Rica twice, we lived in Thailand again, we lived in the Dominican Republic, Uruguay, Hawaii again, Montenegro, Greece, Spain. I've forgotten more places than I can remember. But we lived in, because, as those years went on, I started to make more money, and we lived in like the fanciest resorts ever. Like, we went back to that same island in Thailand, in Copenhagen, and we rented the nicest place you could possibly rent on that island. It was like $2,000 a month. Right? We're talking 180-degree glass view up on the hill, sunset view of the ocean all around the island. Like, butler service, everything. And within about a week, we had had enough because we were isolated from stuff. Meanwhile, we lived in pueblos in Mexico and in Dominican Republic, like pretty tight to people, where the communities looked out for one another. And we were really, really happy. And what I realized in that time was that for me, for the quality of my life, maximizing the amount of what I call positive micro interactions over the course of the day, little waves, little hellos, how you doing? I mean, interactions with neighbors, having people who live close by that really just look after one another was something that we knew that we really wanted in a home. So we could always go and enjoy these exotic places. But we knew that we wanted to have that kind of experience as a home. Where do you want to get into, Amber, in terms of like the work and how the business has evolved? Because at this point now, I'm kind of bouncing forward and back between, call it like 2013 and 2020. And there was a lot of business stuff that happened there. You were there for some of it. What do you think is most interesting? Like the conferences that we had, the evolution of the Online Trainer Academy, the books, self-publishing. What do you think? What do you think the people would be most interested to hear?
Well, I mean, they're all into, they work together, so that's kind of the hard part is one kind of leans into the next. And
Yeah.
so that makes it a little bit hard to choose. I think what would probably be the most helpful for them is probably related to the courses, because there's a
Okay.
lot of crossover with other stuff that they may be doing.
Sure. Okay. So we spoke in the first part of this about all of the phone calls and stuff that I did with our audience. So step one for me was not to build a product and then try to create content to try to promote the product. Step one for me was actually building an audience and community. And then I spoke to the community about what they needed. And so I had 137 phone calls with people in our community. And I talked about this a little bit in part one, so go back and listen to that if you haven't yet. But what came out of that was one respondent, I remember actually, wasn't even on a phone call, it was to an anonymous survey. So the phone calls helped me understand the problem, which is trainers need to be able to make a little bit more in a little bit less time with a bit better schedule. Okay, so that's the problem. I didn't really know what the solution was, but I remember it was, because I still have a screenshot, it was responded 66. This was an anonymous survey, but it was responded 66 on an anonymous survey that I did. It was the first time that somebody had mentioned online training to me. And I didn't really know that much about it, but I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. It seems like it checks off all the boxes. I don't think that this is something that people are going to magically make millions of dollars. It doesn't sound like something that people can do without any work, but it's certainly a way for people to make a bit more, either on the side of training people in person and or being able to leverage the existing skills that you have and knowledge that you have and do it from anywhere. So you can have time and location flexibility, which is, we've just discussed, is pretty important to me. It's not necessarily going to be less hours, but there at least could be hours on your schedule. And that was what I was looking for. So I literally just made up a model for online training. I'd never trained anybody online. I made up a model for online training. And then I put out a call to our community and I said, I'm looking for 24 people to beta test this model for me, and started a coaching service, which was a beta group, which was a founding client challenge beta group. And I took in 24, 22 completed it. And then I took in feedback. And I remember I've called this guy so many different names and stories over the years. I think I'll call him Steven. I think that's what I call him sometimes. But I remember I was on the phone. This is when I was in Hawaii. So this is the year before Thailand. But I remember I was on the phone with this guy, Steven. And he was in this group. So this is the first time I ever taught online training in any capacity. And he said, "Hey man, this doesn't work." I was like, "Oh, shit, it's not what I wanted to hear today." "Why does it not work?" And he told me that he was super burnt out. And so I asked him to describe what he was doing for me. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'll try to remember as best I can. He was offering unlimited program design, unlimited emails and phone call support, and I think it was nutrition program design as well. And he was charging $199 a month for it. And so I asked him how much time that it took him per month to offer these things. And I never really thought about this before, is like figuring out your pricing based off of the amount of time it's actually going to take you to deliver the service and what you need your monthly rate to be. But I asked him how many hours it took him to deliver it. And what he told me, I don't remember the exact breakdown, but it basically took him 7 hours to deliver his services. So he was making, God, I'm going to get all the public math wrong. He was making something like $47 an hour, the equivalent of $47 an hour for the training. No, it was less. He was making like $20 an hour or something for the training that he was doing online. And then I asked him how much he was training clients in person for, and it was like $90 an hour. Like he was losing something like $350 a month for every client that he was working with online because his packages were arranged so poorly. That's when I realized that there was this misconception that just because you're working online, you're working smarter and not harder. Most people, when they go online, actually end up working harder, not smarter, and they work for less money in exchange for more time if they're not careful. Ren and Amber, you guys are nodding because we see this all the time with Online Trainer Academy students. Even people who take the course that don't sign up for like the coaching upgrade. It's like, oh, maybe I'll just like sign up for like the coaching upgrade like after I sign up for the course. You know, I'll try it on my own first. It's like, well, actually, we're going to help you avoid all of these mistakes before you make them. And you won't have gone for a few months like burning yourself out. We're going to guide you a lot better. Because we see this, right? You feel like you're doing people a service by offering them a lot and not charging much money for it. And then you wonder why you're burnt out. So this is what happened to Stephen. And so then I took it a step back and I said, okay, well, you know, based off of what I've learned here with this model of, okay, now we can start to scale this knowledge. So that's when I built the first course, which was called 1K Extra. And the only reason that I tell you the story in that order is because it started with actually talking to people and figuring out what their problem was. Those same people basically told me the solution to the problem. They didn't tell me how to solve it, but they gave me a hint as to what the solution was. I then took on a very small group of people that I worked with very closely for not as much money as I would have ultimately wanted to make from them to test drive the thing before I put in all of the time and effort to build all the course materials for it. And then only when I was confident that I really understood what needed to be there, did I sit down and I built slides and I recorded into my computer. And the first iteration of 1K Extra, which turned into the Online Trainer Academy, was literally PowerPoint slides that I spoke into my computer as I was flicking through the slides, and I just showed my screen. I didn't have a webcam, I didn't have a microphone, nothing. It was slides that I made by myself in PowerPoint using stock image photography. Usually not even good stock image photography. I still have the binder somewhere. It's embarrassing. And spoke into my computer over top of it. Right? Put that out into the world. Because I had already spoken to people and built an audience, we had an initial number of folks bought it. And then over the years, the process was just constantly taking in feedback. So every time that there was a cohort that did it, so we sold it in cohorts at first. We took in 2 groups of people per year because that allowed us to A, focus on the delivery and the marketing of the thing, and then focus on the service of it. And then focus on the marketing and delivery of the thing, and then focus on the service, as opposed to trying to do both at once. This is something we work with a lot with our mentorship students, with our higher level people that are really looking to scale is, well, it's actually really hard to be actively serving your clients and marketing to get new clients at the same time. And so if people happen to come in between, that's cool. But it actually works much better often, not always, but often to do launch periods where you know that you set aside time for all your phone calls and all your marketing, and then you can kind of shift off and get back into client service. And so that's what we did for years. So from 2013 to 2016, we did 2 cohorts a year of 1K extra. Took in people. We had lots of phone calls afterwards with them. We followed what they did and they didn't do, like literally like became Facebook friends with them and watched how they used or didn't use the materials. We didn't ask them. We just watched what they did and then iterated the program based off of the actual usage patterns, success rates, whatever it is. Made changes, made improvements, and then eventually evolved it into what's now known the Online Trainer Academy in 2016. And then we did that same process for another, 2 years, 3 years, Amber? When did we stop the launch cycles? 2019, I think it was.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So like, think about that. 2012, I did 137 phone calls. I then built a model and did a test coaching group. The first iteration of the program was 2013. We did a minimum of 2 launches. I think some years and later times we might have done 3 launches for 6 years, where we constantly iterated and improved on the program. And we brought in outside experts too. I brought in the senior distance course learning director from Yale University. And I brought in a PhD in distance course learning design to assess the learning models and provide us feedback so that we could improve not just the content but like the usability and make sure that it works for people with different learning models. Some people are more visual, right? Some people are more active, right? And then in 2000, so if that gives you any indication of like how much work goes into the stuff behind the scenes, and this is why I say to people, you're probably better off coaching and not trying to build like a scalable course. The Online Trainer Academy is such an anomaly in that world. I can't think of, aside from precision nutrition level 1, I can't think of a single course that exists in our industry that has been around for a decade and consistently sold and improved and made an impact on people's lives for a decade. I think Girls Gone Strong will get there. They just started a little bit after us. But other than that, I can't think. I mean, it doesn't exist. Most people who produce courses, in the best of cases, do 2 to 4 launches of that course before it completely fizzles out and dies. And they would be much better off. It'd be much less upfront effort and cost, much more profitable also, to keep it as a coaching group and a high-end coaching group and scale it as a coaching group. Not saying that it can't happen. It did happen for me. But I mean, we're talking millions of dollars invested and 6 years of constant iteration cycles to get to the point where we were like, okay, the course is basically complete. You know, we update it where we have to, but the course is basically complete and it's timeless. And now we can put this thing kind of on autopilot and have it sit out in the world. Like I think 2 people enrolled yesterday, and we don't market it or really, I mean, other than stuff like this, we don't ever talk about it or market it anymore. What else, Amber? Guide me on this here.
Well, I love that story because we, and Ren can help here too. Like, this is a conversation we have daily with our students, right? Like, man, I've been doing this for 3 months and I still feel like I don't understand what I'm doing. Like, it's been 3 months. Like, you know, it's a slog, right? To get through this, the growing pains of figuring this out. It's hard and it takes a ton of time. And I mean, John, like I assume that you had periods where you're like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. Am I, you know, should I switch gears? Should I quit? Should I, you know,
Periods.
like imposter syndrome type stuff, you know?
I mean, I'm still in one of those periods.
Yeah, right.
You never get out of that.
That's his second home.
Well, that's a lesson my dad taught me, man. I know. That's a lesson my dad taught me, because I remember I don't even remember what the context was, but I was saying something to him like, oh yeah, like once we finally get this, or like once we finally like solve this problem, it's like we'll be there. And he just looks at me, he's just like, John, one thing that you'll understand pretty soon is that business is just one fucking thing after another.
It doesn't get easier. It just gets harder and more complex. As you solve the easier things, the problems that come next are harder problems to solve, and it just never really
so
stops.
much like fitness that it's remarkable that fitness professionals don't see it in their business, because it's
Yeah.
exactly it. You don't get, there's no end result in business. It's just the next workout and the weight's heavier, and that's
Yeah.
it. That's it every day forever. You don't there is no when we get there. It's
So
just
what then? I'm going to ask you guys to coach me because this is not anything that I know. It's something that I struggle with. What then? I mean, you've got to start really taking enjoyment in the process. I get that. I don't quite know how to do that. I think that I enjoy a lot of the things that I do, but I think there's a lot of part of the process that also beats me down. But what then? I mean, there's got to be a way to spend your time. And actually, the best thing for almost everybody listening to this podcast that they could possibly do is just figure out how to run a really good, profitable coaching business and ignoring all of the other shit out there in the world, and then getting smart with their money and living well below their means and learning how to invest. And like not like dumb shit investing for like short term like swing trading stocks, like just like long term patient investing smart principles. That's the best. I mean, I can't think of a single way that's better to generate wealth than that right now in this world that we live in. And yet, what that requires you to do is show up every day and execute and not be stressed a lot of the time about whether something is growing or not growing, which means that there needs to be something else in our lives then that's providing us that, like, okay, I'm growing here. Because I get that in business. I'm like, yo, I'm good. Like, I mean, if somebody wants to show up with a bucket of money to my doorstep and like hand it to me, then that's fine. I'll take it. But I'm not actively doing anything right now to grow the business financially. It's good. It's super profitable. It's super low stress. And I think for the most part, we're having fun, Amber, right? And but there's still a part of me that's like, oh, okay, well, like, then what do I do? Then why do I show up every day? Was I want to get to the point where I know what the few things that I need to execute on reliably every single day, and I am confident showing up and executing those things and not getting up in the middle of the night like a goddamn fool and taking a piss and not being able to fall back asleep because I'm thinking about a whole bunch of things I feel like I should do for no good reason. So Len, coach me. How do I do that?
there are three things that come to mind here for me, gentlemen.
Yes, three things. I'm taking notes. Go.
It relates to you, and it ties into our clients. The very first thing, the anchor of everything that you just said, from my perspective, is that first you know who the hell you're talking to. Like, who were those 137 people? Just random people off the street, or did you know whose opinion you needed the most
Yeah.
to move what you were trying to get accomplished in the right direction? There's so much randomness in our business. I think that's why there aren't very many successfully decades-long courses, because people are just trying to help everybody, right? And
Yeah.
you're trying to start off like Walmart, and you'd be better served starting off as the local hardware store
Yeah.
that supplies wood to local contractors. Start there, know who you're talking to. The second thing for me is
I mean, to cut before you get to the second one there,
yeah,
like that hits home because our mentorship, we have 200 to 400 conversations a day with people interested in our mentorship. And if you want to have a conversation with us about that, go on Instagram. On that, it's Coach Goodman. Send me a DM that just says mentor. Like we help online trainers, gym owners scale online. But we turn down before they even
go.
get to the first phone call. We
Here you
turn
go.
down over 90% of people. Not because we don't like you, but just we know who our thing is for and who it's not for, and that's why our success rate is so unbelievably high. And we also put a lot of efforts into you that if we accept you and you don't do well, It actually could cost us money too, but
Right. Right.
but that that's hard to do. It would be much nicer to say, hey, but that's why you hear about a lot of the other mentorships and stuff that's out there. I mean, I don't even know the names of most of them anymore, but we get people coming from them that have had bad experiences. Like, yeah, we're not accepting you for ours. Like you shouldn't be in any of these kinds of things right now.
Right.
Um, but they were happy to take your money,
Right.
right?
Right. So that's number one. You
Yeah.
know, you can
Second,
solve a lot of problems by knowing who exactly you're talking to and only talking to that person, those people. The second thing for me is your ability to take deliberate action, right? Where you could have thought about writing a book for the next 10 years of your life, or you could have thought about, oh, what kind of business could I possibly build online? Instead of thinking so much about it, your ability to drive to action, some action, for the sake of figuring out what the action should be, I think that's another key in your ability to create things that are
hmm,
needed and reiterate quickly. So by the
yeah,
time someone's decided to do something, you're on your fifth, sixth, or seventh iteration of the thing by, for lack of a better term, fucking it up in public with people and
yeah,
saying, hey, what did we do wrong here? Okay, let's change it. Oh, it's still wrong? Oh, we need to change the third thing. Okay, let's do it. So the deliberate nature of the action taken is such a key in success in business, as a coach, as a person who's trying to improve their fitness. Like sitting on the couch thinking for 10 months about starting to work out is not nearly as productive as going and doing the wrong workout every day this week, because at least you're going to get some data, you're going to get some information back, you're going to learn something,
hmm.
you're going to be able to reiterate. So that's the second thing for me. And
I love one thing that I love before you get to the third one.
mhm,
I admire the hell, both personally and professionally. The people that I admire the most are the people who just they keep their head down and they do their thing. And they generally don't adapt um to fads.
mhm,
They just do their thing. And over time, what I have seen is that these people are never like glossy and celebrated in the moment. There's always people who are louder than them and being celebrated in the moment. But then you wake up one day and it's just like, holy, like, how did you get to where you are? Ryan Holiday is a perfect example of that. I was talking to you guys before because I spent some time with him last week in California. And he's somebody that I truly admire, not because I'm even interested in Stoicism. I'm not. I've never read any of his books about Stoicism. His books before then are some of my favorite books. Uh, but I'm just not interested in the Stoicism thing as much. I've tried to read it. It's not for me. But I admire the hell out of that's just what he does, you know? And if you don't like it, if that's not for you, totally cool. But this is what he does, this is what he talks about, this is who he is. And over time, the right people, his people, find him for that. And it's built such an unbelievably strong platform for him
mhm.
of just keeping his head down and doing the work. And he doesn't have to do too much as well because he's just executed on one vision for long enough for it to matter.
And that's actually the third thing for me is taking
Mm-hmm.
your eyes off the scoreboard and focusing on the play that's about to happen, right? All too often, people are looking towards what am I getting out of this right now? Am I closer to getting some end result thing than I was yesterday? Um, Without realizing that if you're able to take feedback and shift appropriately, and you know who you're talking to, you can't do it. You can't do a decade's worth of business in a day, but you can do a day's worth of business for a decade, right? And people just don't have an ability to just do the day that's in front of them, regardless of what they think the scoreboard might reflect. Just concentrating on the next play. It's one of the most amazing ways that we get the best sports moments in all of sports history. Is there's just some team that's down, man, and they just keep making a play at a time.
Yeah.
Insurmountable odds seem to be overcome just because they're not so focused on getting everything back in one play. It's just a series of continuing without judging the possible end result is a superpower in pretty much every business, but in our business for sure, because our clients need to do that and we need to do that sometimes you miss the sale, man. Sometimes you got to dish out a refund. But you do your best quality work that day, and sometimes, a lot of the times, it doesn't pan out successfully. You can have a shitty day doing your best quality work that day. But if you let it affect you and it shifts you from each day trying to do your best quality work, man, it's a short road to the inner circle of hell. And I've been there, but just committing to do the thing that day is a
Yeah.
superpower. And those are the three
There's a
things
lot
that
of
I take.
Confucius like sayings in there. We need like your alter ego, some kind of Confucius. We need a name for that.
Aloysius. Ren,
There you
Aloysius.
go.
Ren Aloysius Jones. But no, man, that's. I think that sometimes people don't have a great ability to boil down what they've learned to digestible lessons. But man,
Yeah.
that was good stuff for me, man. I loved it. The centipede thing's always weird when I hear it. I don't love that part. I'll admit.
No, I don't like the
Yeah,
centipede thing. What you just said, Ren, was so helpful to me personally that I want to end the podcast on that
sweet.
because that's exactly what I needed to hear right now. And so I just want to call that out and thank you and say that I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for you too.
I was listening. See how I was listening today? You didn't expect me
Yeah.
to be listening.
You're a very good listener. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to recommend another episode if you're looking for something else to listen to right now. Oh, and also please rate our podcast on Spotify if you listen to it there. If you go up to the top of our podcast thing, there's like a star thing now. I think we're close to 100 reviews, so please just leave a 5-star review. And if you're going to leave anything less than a 5-star review, don't do it. If you think anything less than 5 stars about this podcast, just ignore it. Don't leave us a review. But otherwise, if you can go to the top, that'd be wonderful. And thank you. And feel free to take a screenshot and tag me or whatever, and I'll send a thank you to you for doing that. Appreciate you. Another episode to listen to. I'm going to recommend you listen to episode 76. It's called FOMO. This is the one that Amber actually said was her favorite episode, and it ties into this theme about finding the right problems to solve, getting out of your own way, and figuring out what the process is for you to follow in a way that will allow you to both execute and trust that process. Episode 76. Have a listen. It's called FOMO. Hope that you enjoy it. And Ren Aloysius, thank you for the help today, man.
Thank you, Amber.
Bye bye.